Hey Ferret fam, welcome back. Happy to see you here today. We are going to be discussing whether you should keep your ferrets solitary or not. But first, do not forget to hit that subscribe button and consider becoming a member on the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Bryn. I am an animal care content creator here on YouTube. And as always, my sources for this video will be linked below. This is a bit of a controversial subject in the ferret community, but I mean, what's new? Here on the channel, I am constantly diving into these topics that aren't typically talked about a lot in the community to help shed light on them and really discuss if what we are promoting for our ferrets is actually beneficial and right, because we all know that there is a heck ton of misinformation out there on small animals, especially ferrets. For a while, it was deemed okay and even beneficial to house your ferrets solitary alone with no other friends or siblings, and it was actually looked down upon if you were to get more ferrets for them to help with behavioral issues, biting issues, boredom, depression. That was looked down upon and seen as not a guarantee that it will fix things, which I can understand because nothing is absolute, you know. But let's look at the facts here before coming to a conclusion. Polecats, the ferrets' descendants in the wild, actually live solitary lifestyles, and even polecat hybrids, which you can get in certain countries, also tend to prefer to live solitary lives. But in contrast, the domesticated ferret has actually been bred to thrive in pairs or groups or more because it benefited us to be able to house these animals together. So let's look at some of the studies and published works that confirm the ferret's social behaviors, because there are actually a lot of people who do not believe that ferrets are social animals. According to this first study, the isolated ferret, like the isolated rat, is hyperactive. Furthermore, its hyperactivity appears to be related to deprivation of social play. We know that pet rats should also be kept in groups, so this study confirms the ferrets involved suffered being kept on their own, just like the rats did. The second one is a scientific journal on exotic pet behavior. It must be emphasized that the behavior of domesticated animals in captivity differs from that of tamed wild animals, and that these behavioral differences have arisen as a result of the selection by humans. The domesticated ferret, on the other hand, is very social and gregarious, enjoying play activities with conspecifics and preferring to sleep with other ferrets of the same or opposite sex. So while we can take a lot of what we know from the wild polecat and apply it for ferrets, such as nutrition, just because polecats live solitary lifestyles does not mean that the domesticated ferret would also benefit and enjoy that lifestyle. The ferret has actually been domesticated for over 2,000 years by us humans from the wild polecat. According to the National Center for the Replacement, Refinement, and Reduction of Animals in Research, ferrets are sociable and should be kept in compatible pairs or groups wherever possible. In their key features of good ferret husbandry, the first thing they list is house in compatible social groups. If you still don't want to believe me that ferrets are social animals, here are a couple testimonies from you guys. I'll start with my own story. So I did have Pazu on his own for a while, because when you Google it, it appears to be totally fine to have ferrets kept solitary, so of course I thought it would be okay. I gave Pazu 24/7 of my attention, my time, playing with him. I upgraded his cage, he got access to play with my young cat and my dog, and he seemed to be having a fun time in the beginning. But eventually he stopped wanting to play with his toys, he stopped wanting to stash, which was his favorite thing ever, and he just had this very sad look in his eyes, and I didn't know what was wrong because he was young. So of course young animals should want to be roughhousing and playing for a long time as they're young, but he just didn't want to do any of that. I just thought he was lazy. He became so bored though that he started destroying things in my room and in the house, destroy his toys and create blockage hazards. We had a bunch of different blockage scares because of this. He would try to destroy like the floors and pretty much anything, and it didn't stop even when I made his cage bigger and I gave him even more access to time outside in the house, even more playtime with my cat and my dog. Nothing was enough for him. It wasn't until I got Howl that all of the behaviors went away. He actually started playing with toys again, he started stashing, and he had life back into his eyes. there was an instant connection. They were sleeping together, playing together. They were inseparable, and he no longer relied on me completely for attention. A couple more ferrets later, we have Tanji. Tanji was kept solitary all of his life up until he came to me, and he was just also very sad looking. He was also malnourished, obviously, but he just didn't look right until he met the other ferrets, and especially Momo. He has just fallen absolutely head over heels in love with her, and it's so sweet. You can always find him snuggled up under a blanket, actually holding Momo by her body because he loves her so much, and she feels the same for him. And it's been absolutely wonderful to see him blossom, to see him running around the apartment, duking his head off. It took him a couple weeks to actually fully open up to the other ferrets, but now he does, and he can be seen sleeping with them in a cuddle puddle every single day. But here are some of your experiences that you guys sent to me. I'm super thankful and grateful for everyone who sent in their stories. They were all super heartwarming, and I'm sorry if I wasn't able to incorporate your story into this video, but just know that I read them all and I really appreciate it. So the first one says, when I had a single ferret, he was always bored. So bored, pretty much all he did was sleep no matter what at only 5 to 6 months old. I have cats and toys he could play with, but it didn't matter. After finding him what seemed like depression on multiple accounts, I decided to add to the family. He immediately took to his new brother. They love to snuggle and play. Even though they sleep, it is together and not out of boredom. He is so much more happy to have someone he can roughhouse. Soon came a third, which is honestly better than two. When one ferret may be tired of playing, the other one is willing to play. In a business, there's always something to do if it's sleeping together or playing together. This is just super, super sweet, and I do agree with the sentiment that having 3 ferrets is better than 2. Because of that reason, there's always someone that is willing to play. Move on to the second story. When I first got Groot, he was 2 and has been a single guy all of his life. I was told he didn't play with toys and in general didn't play. He was very lazy and slept a lot, even with his free roam time. Almost 2 months later was the first time more ferrets came up for adoption, so we adopted them, and he took to them like he hasn't been a single ferret all of his life. No fighting, just playing and playing. He started duking, and to this day he's 100% a different ferret. This is just so sweet as well, and goes to show that even, you know, if your ferret is showing boredom behaviors, which we'll talk more about later on in the video, giving more free roam time does not always help with that. Sometimes they need social interaction with the same species. Luna was alone when I got her. She briefly lived with a foster mom who had 2 ferrets of her own before she was rehomed to me by herself. She had a lot of trouble bonding with me and seemed to hate me for the first 2 months, and I think it was because she was alone and I was a stranger, which stressed her out. I really think that if she had been with a sibling or a friend, she would have had a much easier transition and it would have been easier for me to bond with her. Now I have my 4 ferrets, and Luna is easily the ferret that I've bonded the most with. Most mornings they walk around the kitchen duking together, and it's the cutest thing. I think having a lone ferret makes it a lot more stressful for them when they're brought into new environments, and therefore it makes it harder for them to adjust. This is a really great observation, actually. They have found that getting a lone ferret from a situation where there were other ferrets and just that adjustment period was extra difficult, not having the same species to actually rely on and relate to. So that's definitely a really great observation, something to keep in mind if you will be getting a second ferret from a family that already has ferrets. Generally, it's not a great thing to separate a already established business, of course, but sometimes it can't be avoided. You know, there's situations, but definitely a good thing for ferret owners to note. So this is our last story. Getting the kits later that summer really brought her out of her shell and taught her how to ferret. She was so gentle with them and so nurturing. She took on a motherly role. If either of the babies made a sound, she would be the first to check if they were okay. If they were playing, she was quick to join in, but be gentle enough that the babies could still enjoy themselves. Because of this need being fulfilled, she has become an incredibly cuddly and loving ferret. She loves her ferret companions, but through learning how to communicate with not just other ferrets properly, but with us, she now loves human companionship too. Taught me that same species companionship isn't just important because they are social and need friends. It's important because when all their needs are met, they develop a better relationship with us too. I love that end sentiment, something to really remember and take into consideration, that Yes, getting other ferrets can help with behavioral issues, can help if, you know, they're not bonding to you. There are a lot of negative consequences that come with bored ferrets, you guys. It's not just like with humans when we're bored, you know, it's whatever. It's a big deal for ferrets because we as humans actually have control over our boredom. We don't have to be bored. But animals that cannot properly communicate with us, they just have to, they're forced to live the way that they are living. Here's a couple of the negative consequences that come with bored animals, bored ferrets. The first being excessive destructive behaviors. I say excessive because ferrets are naturally pretty destructive on their own, but it's more mild. You know, they might get into things that you leave out for them. They're very opportunistic. But excessive destructive behaviors would be them getting into things that they wouldn't normally touch, like maybe cables or wiring, the flooring they start destroying. They start destroying things in their cage, hammocks, bedding. The second one being clingy attitude. Ferrets that are bored may attach themselves to you for entertainment. This might contribute to the development of separation anxiety, which is really hard to fix in ferrets. Number 3, restlessness. They may continuously roam around the apartment or house in circles. They just won't stop. They won't go to bed easily. They're just running around looking for something to do. And the fourth one is depression. This one is pretty easy to spot in ferrets. That would be them sleeping all day. They don't want to play anymore. They don't want to do the things that they used to like. This of course can mean that they might be sick in some way, so you will want to get them vetted to make sure that they're not just sick. This is also a symptom of boredom in ferrets. Number 5, cage raging. This is very detrimental to the ferret's oral health. There are actually photos of ferret teeth damaged from just continuously biting at the bars. There are ferrets that have needed teeth removed because of it, because they just won't stop doing this behavior. And they can also escape if you have them in a flimsy cage, which you shouldn't, but of course many people still do. So those cages are easily escapable, especially if your ferrets are bored and they want to escape. And lastly, bad biting. Ferrets with that lack of social interaction and enrichment will have a tendency to want to bite you more, and this can be a hazard if you have small kids in the house, babies. If your ferrets are exhibiting any of those behaviors, they are probably bored. Doesn't even matter if you work from home or you give them 24/7 free roam and attention, they can still get bored. Now I want you to remember this. Humans do not make great substitutes for species on species interaction and socialization for ferrets. The same can be said for cats and dogs. Cats don't make good substitutes for ferret on ferret play. Dogs don't make good substitutes. Ferrets can't play with those species like they could play with ferrets. It just cannot happen. They are much too rough. I've seen this with my own eyes. They find it really difficult to adapt. And dogs and cats, they find it really difficult to adapt to such a little animal. Okay, so now you've decided on getting your ferret some friends. How should you go about introducing them safely and properly? So number 1, you should always quarantine new ferrets prior to introducing them to your established ferret. You should do this for at least 2 weeks. Make sure that the new ferret has been vetted along with your current ferret. Make sure that they are up to date on their wellness exams and fecal exams and whatnot. For the first week, make sure that you keep them in completely separate rooms. They should not be aware of each other's existence at this point. And then after that, you're gonna wanna swap their blankets, get them used to their smells before they actually meet face to face. And when that time comes, you're going to want to do that in a mutual territory like a bathroom. We'll link more resources below on how to introduce ferrets properly. But the general rule of thumb is no pee, no blood, no poop, no foul. Make sure to follow that because ferrets roughhouse a lot, and people often mistake that with violence towards the new ferret or vice versa, when actually that's just how they play together. I encourage you to read up on ferret play behaviors and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, and of course every ferret is different. I have videos on this on my channel of my ferrets playing, and you can actually watch those to see how my ferrets interact with each other properly and what is okay, what is not okay, the sounds that your ferrets may make with each other, and more. So will all ferrets get along with others? No, there will always be exceptions to any rule, especially for animals. There are many dogs that don't get along with others. There are many cats that don't get along with others. There are going to be many ferrets that don't get along with others. But I do think that most people give up way too soon. They see this roughhousing, they see this biting play, and they think that it's bad. If you happen to be in the minority and have a ferret that doesn't get along with others no matter what you do, and you've ensured you've followed the proper introductory steps and followed up with any training if necessary, your ferret may benefit from being kept solitary. But you have to make sure you're providing ample free roam time and lots of attention. There are 2 rules that you're going to want to consider before coming to that conclusion. First one being, is my ferret being aggressive out of fear? And the second one is my ferret being aggressive out of pain? This is something that you're going to want to get seen by the vet. Many ferrets have had baggage from previous owners, and they might have had a poor experience with another ferret. They were not allowed to be introduced to them properly and had a bad experience, and that one experience has been ingrained into their minds. So these bad experiences may need to be worked through first before bringing another ferret into the home. So make sure to consider both of those things before deciding that another ferret is not for you. So what age of ferret should you get for your established ferret? Now, I talked a little bit about this in my recent video, but you're gonna want to pick a ferret that best matches your current one. That might mean a similar age range, but that's not always necessarily the case. I would focus more on matching personality. And keep in mind, if you plan on getting another baby ferret, their personality hasn't fully developed yet. They're not emotionally developed just yet, so they may turn out to be a totally different personality. So it's best to get older ferrets that are more established and you really know what you're getting. So some other considerations that I talked about briefly earlier in the video, it is ideal to have 3 or more ferrets, because down the line, when you lose one, the remaining ferret will go through a mourning period. They might have depression, they might stop eating. This is very common for the remaining ferret to have when they lose their friend. So it's best to have at least 3, so when that does happen, they are not left alone. The other most important consideration is, can you afford more than 1 ferret? The differences in expense won't be a huge jump from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 ferrets, but you are going to still want to make sure that you have that vet fund saved for each of your ferrets. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today, and I hope those of you that have single ferrets out there consider getting friends for your ferret. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button, follow me on Instagram, and consider becoming a member on the channel. Thank you to all of my members already. I am super happy to have you on board. Alright, I will see you in my next video. Bye!